India's government is gearing up for a truly massive spend, with a budget that's going to shape the economic future for well over 1 billion people. So, what's the real story behind these incredible numbers? Well, let's dive in and decode it together.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at that huge headline number. Then, we'll get into the strategy behind it and a fascinating paradox about its funding. We'll also follow the money, see where every rupee comes from and where it goes. And finally, we'll wrap up with the single biggest economic bet that the country is making.
All right, first things first, let's try to get our heads around the one number that defines this entire financial plan.
And here it is, 53.47 lakh crore rupees. That is the colossal amount of money the government plans to spend in the 2026-27 fiscal year. Honestly, it's a number so big it's almost abstract, but it signals a massive ambition for where the economy is headed.
But you know what's really striking here is just how big of a jump this is. We're not talking about a small incremental increase. This is a leap of nearly 7 lakh crore rupees in just 2 years. That tells you the government is deliberately taking a very bold expansionary stance.
So the big question is, where is all this extra money actually going? And that brings us to the real heart of this budget strategy, a major pivot in the kind of spending the government is doing.
Now, to really get this, we need to be clear on two key terms. You've got revenue spending, which is for the day-to-day running costs. Things like government salaries and subsidies. But then you have capital spending, or CapEx, and that's totally different. That's about building things that last, real long-term assets like highways, ports, and digital networks that can actually power future growth.
And you can see that choice right here in this chart. A massive slice of the pie, over 17 lakh crores, is being pumped into effective capital expenditure. This is a very conscious, strategic decision to prioritize building for the future, betting that these assets will generate returns for many, many years to come.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. The government is planning to spend more money than ever before, but at the same time, it's saying it's getting its borrowing under control. Now, how on earth is that possible? Welcome to the growth deficit paradox.
So yeah, this is the central puzzle we've got to solve. How do you possibly square that circle? You're spending more in absolute terms, but the deficit as a slice of the whole economy is actually shrinking.
Just look at this trend line. The fiscal deficit, that's the gap between what the government earns and what it spends, hit a peak of 9.2% of GDP during the pandemic. Now the plan is to bring it all the way down to 4.3%. This journey is what's called fiscal consolidation, and it's a really important signal of financial discipline to the rest of the world.
And here it is. Here's the answer to the paradox. The whole entire plan hangs on one single critical assumption, that India's economy is going to grow at a nominal rate of 10%. See, the idea is to grow the whole economic pie, the denominator, much faster than the borrowing, the numerator. It's a really bold strategy for sure, but it's also risky, because if that growth doesn't happen, the math just falls apart.
Okay, so if the plan is to ride a wave of growth, let's follow the money itself. Where is every rupee coming from? And more importantly, what's the biggest cost that's weighing this entire budget down?
This gives us a really clear picture of the government's income streams. Direct taxes, so that's your income tax plus corporate taxes, they make up the biggest slice at 39%, which is a good sign of a maturing, formalizing economy. But look at that second biggest piece. Borrowings still make up a huge 24% of all the funds. And all that borrowing comes at a very, very steep price. This slide right here, this is the reality check. The annual interest payment on all that past debt is a staggering 14 lakh crore rupees. I mean, to put that into perspective, India's total interest bill is now bigger than all the money it collects from corporate tax. It's even bigger than all the money it collects from GST. That's the heavy weight of yesterday's decisions on tomorrow's budget.
That kind of financial pressure forces you to make some tough choices, and we can see that playing out in a major philosophical shift in how the government is approaching social welfare.
Just look at this rebalancing act. Funds are clearly being pivoted away from the long-standing MGNREGA scheme, which is all about guaranteeing rural jobs, and towards this new scheme that focuses on skilling people up for formal employment. This isn't just a simple budget tweak, it's a fundamental shift in strategy, from providing a basic safety net to actively trying to build a career ladder.
So let's step back. When you put all these pieces together, the huge spending, the focus on capital, this growth paradox, the shift in welfare, what's the one big idea that's holding it all together?
It all boils down to this one fundamental wager. The government is betting everything on the idea that by spending aggressively on infrastructure today, it can spark enough economic growth tomorrow. And that growth, in theory, will expand the tax base and shrink the debt as a share of the economy, hopefully creating a positive upward spiral.
Ultimately, if you want to sum up this entire budget, this is it. It is a strategy of pure forward momentum. It's an attempt to use sheer scale and speed to build a future that's bigger and more prosperous than the financial constraints we've inherited from the past. And whether this high-stakes wager pays off, well, that's the question that will define India's economic story for years to come.